Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear students, welcome back for the new lesson of the world history. This is the fourth lesson of the chapter that we are discussing, French Revolution. You can reach your lesson in your book page number 230. Uh, Before we move forward, you must know that the lesson is divided into 3 weeks, so we will be discussing a portion of the lesson. Let's move on to the lesson objective. The lesson objective says that you must be able to understand Napoleon's rise to power and why the people of France, strongly supported him. Uh, the next objective says that you must be able to explain how Napoleon built an empire that stretched across the Europe and what challenges did his empire face. You must be able to analyze the events that led to the downfall of Napoleon, and you must be able to outline how the Congress of Vienna tried to create a lasting peace after the removal of Napoleon from the power in France. Some of the terms mentioned in the lesson, although we will be discussing them during the slides, but here a small introduction of the terms is that the number one is plebiscite. It's a kind of vote where the people they show their opinion through ballot. Napoleonic Code is a set of laws. It was created under Napoleon's guidance, and this set of laws represents or reflects the Enlightenment ideas, the principles of equality, tolerance, and freedom. Annex, it means to take over a territory and declare it as your own, or to add a territory to your existing territory, or to your existing state or country or empire. Continental system, it was an economic arrangement in Europe where the member countries were forced, or you can say supposed, to follow the common economic policies, and Napoleon used it as a warfare, as a weapon against Britain, and forced the member countries to close their ports to British trading goods. So this was a kind of economic system. Guerrilla warfare. It's a kind of warfare where soldiers they attack and they escape. Scorched earth policy is the kind of military tactic, which means that whenever a military or an army retreats from a position, they burn out everything so that the enemy should not be able to get any benefit from the area they are vacating, from any facilities that are there, so they destroy them. The reason is that it makes difficult for enemy to survive in that area, to maintain its supply line, to maintain its shelter. So when everything is destroyed for enemy, for an advancing enemy, it is difficult to survive in that area. Abdicate mean to step down from the power willfully. So whenever someone says that I am no more the leader, or I am no more the president, or I am no more the prime minister, it means he is abdicating. In other words, you can say he is resigning from his responsibilities. Congress of Vienna, it was a meeting of the heads of states within Europe after the War of Waterloo, in which the Napoleon and French army was defeated, and from that point onward Napoleon could not rise again, and European nations they started to meet periodically. They set up an organization where they try to find out the ways to bring stability and peace to Europe. So that was Congress of Vienna. Legitimacy means the right, the moral right or legal right to rule. Basically, during the Napoleon's time, he managed to remove many of the monarchies, established monarchies, from the thrones of different countries, And when Napoleon was removed from the power, European nations they adopted this principle of legitimacy, which means that those monarchies that were removed, they have the right to be back in power. So those monarchies were restored. Concept of Europe is a kind of is a kind of a system in which the powers of Europe they meet periodically. You can say in today's time it is European Union, and at that time they used to sit together and discuss the problems that were posing any threat or any danger to the peace of Europe. Moving to our first question, it says that explain Napoleon's rise to power in Europe, his subsequent defeat, and how the outcome still affects Europe today. You must know that Napoleon rose to power because he belonged to military. He fought for France, and he had a tremendous past, or you can say glorious past, before assuming the power of the ruler. The French very much respected him, and they believed that he was the leader or he was the hero of France. So he got the opportunity when France was in chaos, and in the middle of the chaos, he was given the responsibility which he took over, and ultimately France became a great power during his days. So Napoleon rose to power in the midst of near chaos. Near chaos means when there is completely, or you can say almost no rule of law, almost anarchy, because the directive was completely incompatible. It was not able to solve the problems to France. So there was widespread corruption in France. The people they believe that they need a hero that can lead the nation out of the trouble. So because of his glorious military career, he was given the responsibility to bring France out of disorder. So his successes actually on the battlefield, along with his strong governmental control, encouraged the French to feel a sense of nationalism that brought Europe to its knees. Even because other nations in the Europe, the neighboring nations like Britain and Russia and Austria-Hungary, they were one of the major say rivals to France in those days. But the growing strength of France made them brought them on their knees. So they recognized France as a regional power that can define the new policies or that can dictate the new rules. So Napoleon's laws they were spread throughout the Europe during the expansion period of France and remain an important pillar of the governmental systems even in many countries today. So moving on to the next slide, we come here about how Napoleon rose to power. Napoleon was, as we discussed, a military hero. So his glorious military career brought him the recognition. As a result, he managed to reach to the top of the French ruling class. He himself had a very conflicting personality. You can see the slide says that he favored Republican rule and the Jacobins. Now, Jacobins were the radicals, those who wanted abrupt changes, and they were the people who were in favor of bringing peace and order through the use of brute force. And at the same time, Napoleon favored the Republican rule, which means liberty, democracy, and freedom, and the rights of every citizen are recognized and protected. Now, at one time, he says, "I favor the Republican rule," and at the same time, he believes that the Jacobins are right people because they wanted to bring peace in the society by the use of brute force. They are the two conflicting colors of his personality. Anyway, in 1793, his career brought him in the middle of the scene inside France. What did he do? He defeated the British forces in the French city of Toulon. It is in the southern side of France. He had victories against the Austrians, and he captured territories in the northern Italy, not all of Italy. And by the way, Italy at that time was not a single unified country, it was a combination of different states. And because Italy came into existence as a single country in 1861. So in 1793, Italy means that the Italian city-states at that time, they were all small states having a common identity of Italian language only. So there were different states. In 1798, he had a military adventure against Egypt where he lost, but by using the press through his own means, he portrayed himself as a winner, and he hid the news of the losses from the French public, and French people did not know that he lost the adventure. So he only portrayed his victories to the French public, and he hid the losses. In 1799, he managed to remove the directory, which was a governing body responsible to run the state of France. As we discussed in the previous lesson, the directory was corrupt, so they were unable to address the troubles to France. Ultimately, Napoleon managed to remove the directory and set up a three-man governing board known as the consulate. Now you remember that the directory was 5 people and consulate became 3 member. Now just imagine that Committee of Public Safety was 13 members, the directory was 5 members, and the consulate was now 3 members. And in the consulate, Napoleon was the most influential person holding the dominant position. Once he established the consulate, he became the first consul, meaning to say is that he was the leader of that three-man governing body. Whatever he decided was implemented. In 1802, he became the consul for life, and 2 years later, he declared himself the Emperor of France, the ruler of France. Now, just imagine that the revolution that was brought in order to bring the change in society, French society, once again was drifting backwards, and Napoleon became an emperor like Louis XVI, an absolute ruler of the country. Uh, but during this time, at each stage, Napoleon he held a plebiscite. Uh, but the problem with the plebiscite was that uh, if the people of France were not in favor of his decision or his opinion, he announced the result of the plebiscite only in a distorted form. If the majority of the French public refused his opinion, he did not declare it in the plebiscite result. In fact, what did he say was the other way, that the public has given their opinion in his favor. So Napoleon actually distorted the press, muzzled the press, and distorted the information in front of the public. Once Napoleon took over the complete control over power in France, he initiated some major reforms. The purpose of these reforms was to restore order in French society and to bring back the prosperity, economic prosperity, and strengthen the central government. For example, he controlled the prices, he encouraged the expansion of industries, he started to build roads and canals. The purpose of these big projects was to allow him to create jobs for the public and to decrease the possibility of protests against his government. He set up the public schools. He made peace with the church. He invited the emigres, those who escaped. The emigres were the people who escaped. They were the French people who escaped from the France during the early time period of French Revolution. So he invited them to get back or to come back and settled down, he recognized the rights of the peasants to get control over the lands where once they worked. So he, you can say, removed the titles of nobility actually, and he opened jobs for all the male citizens based on their talents. So these were some of the reforms which actually brought him public favor. So he had a huge popularity among the masses of the France. But one thing you should know that women, they lost most of their newly gained rights, and they could not exercise the rights of citizenship. Male heads of the household, they regained the complete authority over their wives and children, and the purpose of this policy was explained by Napoleon himself. He believed that the mothers are the best builders of the nation, so the women should not do jobs. In fact, they should remain at home and take care of the family. Child rearing was their prime responsibility for a better future, for a bright future generation. A good mother was the only way to make this possibility into reality. So these were some of the reforms. Let's move on to the next slide. What it says, Napoleonic Code actually. Uh, the most important reform was the creation of a set of laws which is known as Napoleonic Code. And the code basically reflects the Enlightenment principles, the ideas of Enlightenment that we discussed that were the major cause of revolution in America, in France. So basically these Napoleonic Code also reflects the same ideas: equality of all the male citizens, religious toleration, and nobility is no more entitled for the privileges. But as I just discussed now, that women, as a result of this Napoleonic Code, lost many of their privileges as a citizen, because for him the responsibility of the woman was not in the market or not in the work areas, but as a mother. From 1804 to 1812, this is the time period when Napoleon added territory to the French dominion. He successfully battled most of the Europe and created an empire. You can see on the map the purple color represents France. Uh, just in the Mediterranean, you can see uh, just exactly where modern day Italy is, there is a purple color inside Italy. These are the areas which were invaded by France, and they are today Italian territories. Across the Arctic Ocean, across the Adriatic Ocean, some territory which is modern day Croatia was also a French territory. Some of the lands, they were, you can say, allies only. They were not invaded, and some of them, they were dependent nations on France. They were independent technically, but they depended on France for making all the relevant decisions about foreign policy or internal policies of economy. So they were dependent nations on France. So here it says France annexed the Netherlands, Belgium's, parts of Italy and Germany. They are shown here in the purple color. Napoleon also cut the Prussian territory. Just you can see the purple arrows here. The color of the Prussian territory is also what color it is? It is light purple color. So Prussian territory was cut into half, and he abolished the Holy Roman Empire. You must know that Holy Roman Empire was based in modern day Germany. Basically, they followed the Church of Rome as a source of religious inspiration, but there were almost 360 small states which make up today's Germany, modern day Germany. So it was basically the Holy Roman Empire. Um, he placed one of the most tricky step he played was that he placed his relatives over most of the monarchies in Europe. For example, he placed his brother in the Spain as a ruler of Spain. and he removed all those monarchies that were against the revolution in France, and or you can say that were posing any threat to the French expansion or posing any challenge to the authority of France in the region. In Europe, only Britain was the country that was outside Napoleon's empire. Its geographic location was one of the major reasons that Napoleon could not invade Britain. Why? Because they had a strong navy all through their history, and their geographical location helped them to survive any land invasion. British Navy actually they defeated the French naval force at the Battle of Trafalgar near Spain in 1805, and that battle was one of the turning point in Napoleon's you can say adventures against Britain. From that point onward, Napoleon never believed that he can win the British territory, so he left the idea. Uh, to defeat Britain in a different way, then he turned onto economic warfare because he believed that militarily he cannot attack or invade Britain. So the best way to defeat Britain is to stop the doors of or to close the doors of Europe for the British trade goods. So what did he do? He imposed continental system on the European countries that were under French influence, or you can say under French dominance, although they were independent, but because France was an emerging power, so they were forced to follow the continental rule system. So this blockade actually created some hardships for Britain, but still Britain survived this tough time, and France, though tried to stop the trade routes between India and America, the British trade routes, but still Britain managed to maintain its sea trade. So that is the end of today's lesson here. Inshallah, we will continue with the same lesson in the next week. Thank you very much. Hope to see you soon.